keep bullying me. You'll want to run and hide.
Hi everyone, welcome to a doozy. My name is Miss Tech and Mechanic. Up debuff. Tanks can take each hit solo within immunity sections of the platform for AoE blasts. Players must ensure they are not inside the affected squares. At roughly the same time, each player will be marked with this yellow Pulse of the Land marker. This will soon target them for an AoE attack that affects the entire square segment that player is standing inside of. The attack deals moderate damage and applies a short magic vulnerability up debuff, making it so that the attacks cannot be overlapped. As such, each player needs to stand alone in their very own square segment anytime this attack is going off. The easiest way to do this is to assign a square that begins with one source square segment and then explodes any adjacent squares in succession until all of the squares of the platform have been targeted by the attack. On Savage mode, there are 2 Evil Earth source squares at the same time. Luckily, there are only 4 possible Evil Earth patterns. Set tech in the tubes, you can see where Evil Earth into the center goes off all as the Pulse of the Land, which will deal high raid-wide AoE damage. As you can expect in lands, he will turn back towards the platform and begin one of 2 possible mini. 3 players will be marked for the yellow spread markers. The 3 yellow markers will always target 1 tank, 1 damage dealer, and 1 healer. Let's take a look at what happens if he changes into his wheels. Similar to normal mode, Titan will destroy anyone directly in front of him and knock back players on his sides. The raid will need to make sure they're on the side of him with 2 available square sections or they will get knocked off the platform. The yellow and orange markers go off at the same time as Titan drives across the platform and knocks everyone back. To handle this combo, we assign specific squares to each set of players to ensure everyone is pre-positioned in appropriate squares once the knockback happens. All of the orange players will stack on the square adjacent to Titan. The 3 yellow players will spread to each square next to the incoming Titan drive-by. To minimize confusion, we have any melee players prioritizing the square closer to Titan, while healers move to the furthest square. Ranged and tanks will adjust into the middle third square as necessary. Once Titan drives across the platform, all players will be knocked back in the same orientation as they originally lined up in, and the yellow and orange markers will resolve. Before moving in, players will need to wait for the blue shockwave attack that follows the massive Titan attacks. After the shockwave, Titan will immediately turn around and target the primary tank for fault line, charging back at them for high proximity base damage. To minimize damage, you'll want the tank furthest away from Titan to take this hit, and depending on which tank gets which color marker, a tank swap may be necessary to facilitate this. Once those markers come out, the tank with the orange marker can provoke. After the knockback, the primary tank can then run back in line with Titan and pop a cooldown to take the second dash damage. All other players must ensure they don't move into this line of square segments until the dash completes, or they will probably die. Immediately after this dash back to the tank, Titan will cast Magnitude 5.0, which will deal lethal damage to anyone not inside of its hitbox. At the same time, all players will again be targeted by another round of yellow Pulse of the Land markers. To handle this combo, once Titan dashes back to the tank, all players can run into his hitbox. Once the donut attack goes off, players must quickly move into their assigned squares to avoid overlap. Again, we use our assigned relative positions to Titan to avoid confusion. Once these yellow markers go off, Titan will return to his regular form and this mini phase is complete. Before we go on, let's take a look at what happens if he reforms into gauntlets instead for the mini phase. Again, 5 players will be targeted with the orange Force of the Land markers, and 1 tank, 1 damage dealer, and 1 healer will be marked with yellow. This massive landslide attack will destroy anyone not directly in front of him, and players will need to line up in the 4 squares in front to avoid death. Again, the timing of the yellow and the orange marker explosions forces players into very specific squares. The group of orange markers will stand in the same square Titan is on. The first square directly in front of him will be occupied by melee, with the healers in the 4th square, furthest from Titan. The tanks or the ranged will again be in the 3rd square as necessary. As soon as the massive landslide attack goes off on either side, all players will need to immediately move out of that line they were standing in to avoid the secondary blue shockwave attack. Next, he will cast another Voice of the Land, and healers need to be ready with those shields and heals. This is followed by Landslide, a massive cross-shaped attack in a pattern signified by the direction that Titan faces before he jumps away. To easily determine where the safe spots for Landslide are, the tanks should reposition Titan directly in the center of the room. 2 possible safe spots will form based on where he looks and he eventually lands, and all players must move into them as quickly as possible. As soon as the attack goes off,
Tired of your foolish game, time wasted, trying to look so tough. I'll change it, kill the lights, gonna fight, don't you hassle me on this ride. Feel the spite, won't play nice, don't you bully me. You'll want to run and hide, the impact of your style has faded. You dish it out and see if you can take it. Kill the lights, gonna fight, don't you hassle me on this ride. Feel the spite, won't play nice, don't you bully me. You'll want to run and hide. Accepting your assault, no more. I'm breaking down that wall. Let's do this. Kill the lights, gonna fight, don't you hassle me on this ride. Feel the spite, won't play nice.
off, each player will need to move out of the safe spots to avoid the next shockwave attacks that will hit those same areas. At the same time, bomb boulders will drop around the platform in a plus and X configuration, in a random order. On top of all of that, Titan will turn back around and cast either left or rightward landslide, which will target one half of the platform. Players will first need to dodge the initial left or right landslide, and then immediately move into that same area to avoid the next blue shock.
you bully me. You want to run and hide.
Hi everyone, welcome down 3 rows of small bomb boulders in. Titan will cast Earthen Fists, powering up his world triggers. Anyone in the same square and any adjacent square to that attack will be hit for damage and a magic vulnerability up debuffed. All of this while the knockback is happening. I would highly recommend saving your knockback immunity during the second Geo Crush in the first phase to have it available for this. This allows for minimal after the knockback. Both tanks are targeted by Earthen Anguish, a massive circle AoE tank buster. The tanks need to make sure they're far enough away from each other and the group to avoid overlap. Immediately after, a tank will be marked for Megalith with your stack up marker. This damage is significant and must be shared by both tanks with cooldown. The damage can only be split between 2 equals, so make sure only the tanks are stacking for this attack. Up next is Tectonic Uplift, which will cause 2 diagonal quadrants of the platform to be raised. It's possible to jump from a raised platform to one below, but movement between the quadrants is otherwise impossible, as the platforms are being marked for Tectonic Uplift. 1 tank or healer and 1 damage healer are marked with blue Weight of the World markers. These players need to take their markers to the far corners of the lower quadrant to minimize their explosion impact. The rest of the group will split into 2, with the damage healers moving on to the north race platform while the other tanks and healers move on to the south race platform. As soon as the Weight of the World markers go off on the lower quadrant, Weight of the Land AoEs will appear in random patterns. While the exact location of each Weight of the Land AoE is random, one of the lower quadrants will always have 3 safe segments, while the other only has 2 safe segments. Immediately after, the players on the race platforms will each be marked with a the raised platforms, moving to the far corners to targeted by weight of the land positions. In this specific quadrant, you have one segment targeted by weight of the land, one segment for the original blue marker player, and two segments for the incoming yellow marker players. The players with the orange markers will meet on the specific lower quadrant that only has two available safe segments. They'll both stand in one segment to share the damage of the orange marker. This specific lower quadrant has two weight of the land segments, one segment for the original blue marker player and one segment for the two orange markers to share. All of these attacks go off at the same time, and players must be in each of their assigned spots to avoid death. At this point, all players can move into the middle to continue their attack on Titan. Earthen Fury is cast here, and healers need to be ready with their shields, heals, and raid cooldowns. Once Earthen Fury goes off, the platform will be returned to normal. Next up, Rock Throw will target the two healers for jails. These healers will need to move pretty far away from each other, otherwise the